Welcome to the BuiltOnAir podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. In each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different, and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, OnToAir Backups. OnToAir Backups provides automated Airtable backups to your cloud storage for secure and reliable data protection. Prevent data loss and set up a secure Airtable backup system with OnToAir Backups at OnToAir.com. As one customer, Sarah, said, having automated Airtable backups has freed up hours of my time every other week and the fear of losing anything. Longtime customer David states, OnToAir Backups might be the most critical piece of the puzzle to guard against unforeseeable disaster. It's easy to set up, and it just works. Join Sarah, David, and hundreds more Airtable users like you to protect your Airtable data with OnToAir Backups. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at OnToAir.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air.
Welcome back to the Built on Air podcast. We are in episode 7 of season 17. Good to be with you. Myself, Dan Fellers, and special guest Leslie Burke. Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you with us. We've got, I think some bug going around. Both Camille and Allie are out today. And so it's going to be just the two of us, unless somebody joins midstream. We'll see. So excited to have you on. We'll get to know Leslie and her story a little bit later in the show. But first, I'll walk us through what we're going to be doing today. As always, we do 4 segments to keep you up to date in Airtable. We always start with our Around the Bases and talk about any new updates or things going on in the world of Airtable. Then a quick shout out to our sponsor, OnToAir. Then we'll learn about Leslie and her background and how she came into this world of Airtable. And then she will then show us a base and application that she built called GuestBook. And then join our community, how to get involved with us and what we're doing. And then finally, we'll talk about the new Date Dependency field functionality that Airtable just rolled out. So exciting to talk about that. Okay, with Round the Bases, a few things that are new in the world of Airtable. They had a couple announcements, and like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about it, but there's a few other things that they announced. They now have Gantt in interfaces. So they had previously the Gantt as a view at the data layer, but now you can import Gantt inside of your interfaces. And so you can see there's now a layout option, so you can switch between a list view and a Gantt view on there. So that is nice. If you rely on Gantt, really a lot of what they launched this week are really big on project management. I think they're like going directly after Monday.com and other project management tools to make sure that you can switch over and have that functionality. The second one is date dependency configuration. This is one we're going to showcase how you actually do this and how that works. And so that is new. And that's obviously with Gantt being dates, that's involved heavily with the Gantt views as well.
Yeah,
I have at the data layer.
I have a marketing client who has wanted to do Gantt view. We've used it in the past, but it just hasn't been useful because there hasn't been the date dependency piece. So we're really, really excited for that.
Cool. Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, let's see. We'll talk about this later in the show. We'll review those. Okay. See who's free when assigning tasks. So when assigning tasks, you can preview team utilization before and after assigning the task. So that's kind of cool. This utilization feature. I think that's on a collaborator field. We'll share that. I have not played with that one, so I'm curious. I'll dig into that this week.
Yeah, me either. I haven't had a chance to try that yet.
I haven't seen that one. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I don't think this is a new field type. I think it's a percentage type, maybe. Okay. Coming soon. This is something we've teased in the past, dynamic filtering. These views allow you to compare utilization when choosing team members, but imagine you also want to filter the selection to people who have the required skills, role, or team for a task. We'll be releasing a feature which allows you to filter record selection dynamically, which means the filter can depend on a property of the task you are trying to assign someone to. It will not only help with resource allocation, but numerous other use cases, such as filtering offices to a given location or products to a given vendor. So that is exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting. A lot of people have been waiting a long time for that.
Yep. Yeah, and they've been teasing it in the community for a little bit, but hopefully that really means coming soon. I wonder if they were hoping to get it live, but it wasn't quite ready.
Yeah,
release.
And it'll probably sneak out, and we won't know it, or we'll see, and maybe someone will have it, but some people won't for a while. Who knows?
Yep. Somebody will spot it in the BuiltOnAir community. They're good at spotting those new features.
Yep.
All right, and then the last one, a couple templates, which actually I'll be showing one of the templates in my segment. So really good way to just get started with how to use some of this new functionality. They've got template bases with interfaces that you can use to get started there. So yeah, those are new features. If you go to the what's new, it talks about those. Let's see if we talk about, informed task assignment. Is this the same thing? Summary utilization feature. We've made it easier. So that's the utilization feature. And then this was one they didn't talk about. They actually refreshed the icons. I don't know if you noticed new icons.
I noticed that.
Yeah. So there's new icons before and after. Actually, I don't know if I even noticed. They're not too different. They're not drastically different, but maybe a little bit smaller, it seems like.
Yeah. They're enough similar, and if I wasn't going to look, I probably wouldn't actually notice.
Yeah. People may not notice those. So anyways, new refresh. And then this last one, the date dependency that we'll be talking about later in the show. So that is some of the new functionality. There's also, I'm gonna move this down. There's also, so in the BuiltOnAir community, they spotted it, Ben spotted it, the Gantt layout in the timeline view. Interesting. You can switch between stacked and Gantt layout options. So it's an actual timeline view in the interface that has a Gantt layout. So that is interesting. Yeah, new layout options. Okay. So it sounds like, I actually didn't look at this. So it sounds like it's not a new Gantt view. It's the timeline view, but a Gantt layout.
Yeah. I haven't tried it. I read about it a little bit when they released information about it, but I haven't actually tried it out.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see it.
Yep. So those are a few things. And then there was also some quiet improvements to the mobile app, Max says, the UX, the charts. And so it looks like new dashboard view is accessible in the iOS mobile app. So it looks like they're making some improvements to the mobile apps that they didn't put on the what's new section. So that's good. I think Android was behind iOS in feature and functionality. So it looks like Android's starting to catch up.
Right. And all the Android users of the world rejoice.
Yes.
They're ready for some mobile. some mobile
Yep.
access.
Yep. Yeah, and it's good to see that. Yeah, and you can kind of see with the iOS, they've got the new dashboard interface. So iOS looks to be ahead still.
Yeah, it probably always will be a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Okay, here's an interesting one. Somebody, Ayub talks about interface limits. They want to have 100 interfaces. There's a couple of things I want to highlight in here. One, Scott does a good job of talking about alternative ways to reduce the need for so many interfaces, and maybe even like using an external solution for whatnot. But then there's another item in here that comes up that talks about the users. So they talk about how if you share access to an interface, let's see, where is this? Yeah, the full list of invited users to the interface will always show up in the manage sharing section. There's no way to hide that from any of the users. So when you're logged into an interface and you click on the share menu and click on manage access, even if you're a read-only user, you'll see a list of all the other people with their email address who also have access to that interface. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's a major problem. I think people have mentioned this in other threads before too, that this becomes a problem when you're trying to share outside of your organization, with clients or whatever. Creating that user dash or interface that has for the user records only would be great to be able to do that, but this is a problem, right? Because they can still see anyone else that you've created or give access to the dashboard. So.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely. So one thing, that's about notifying. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so that's something to be aware of. Yeah, if you don't want people to see. It's also interesting. Sometimes I do I've been shared to bases that are like public bases shared with everybody, and you can kind of see, who else has access to this base?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they give a workaround in that thread?
Not to hide that. No.
Yeah, it's more just be aware of it.
Yeah. So, yep, that's something to be aware of. Okay, a couple other things in the Airtable community. Something we've seen and talked a lot about is OAuth refresh token grants fail intermittently. This one's interesting. Being a developer, having implemented OAuth here, this is definitely something we faced in the early days. I feel like Airtable's improved in how they handle this, and so it was a little bit surprising to me that people are still seeing this, because we don't see it how as like we were seeing it in the early days of OAuth. But I also know that it's actually very difficult to implement to do this right, and so it's very possible that the developer here needs to just be aware there's lots of edge cases of how you can trigger this to fail. So if you're an OAuth developer, this is tricky. Feel free to reach out in the BuiltOnAir forum. And actually that's what Scott mentions, to go to the Slack community, and there's other developers that may be able to help. But I will say it is not straightforward. There's things that Airtable could do to make it easier for developers that I've asked them to do that they don't seem interested in doing at this point. But so it's not an easy thing, but I think it is possible to work around it. All right. Last week we talked about spreadsheet.com going out of business. And so this was interesting to see somebody asking for help on how to migrate their data out of spreadsheet.com to Airtable. I don't think Airtable has any kind of built-in import from spreadsheet.com. I believe another competitor, Smart Suite, does. They announced that they can help people migrate over. So my guess is most people from Spreadsheet are going to Smart Suite, but it does look like some people are coming to Airtable. And you would basically, if you are in the spreadsheet.com world and want to move to Airtable, likely the easiest would be to just export all your data CSV and then do an import CSV into Airtable. But you'll likely lose some functionality. It's a different experience. Having played with spreadsheet.com, it's not exactly like Airtable, although there's definitely a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
All right, next one. This is kind of our monthly reminder. Man, it seems like every week somebody's asking for how to get help from Airtable support. They this one doesn't say what tier they're on, but Airtable, with their last pricing change, made it so you have to pretty much be on, like, I think, team to get support.
Yeah.
Might even be enterprise to where they actually say you'll get support.
Yeah, the lowest 2 tiers don't. And so
Yeah.
my guess is this person just doesn't realize that their tier doesn't actually come with live support.
Yeah. But it does say, like, they did get an automated reply saying that they'd get a response. So that reply, I don't know if that goes to everybody or just to people who actually can access support. I don't know. I haven't accessed support in a while.
Yeah, I haven't had to either lately. But
yeah. But this is common. This is definitely something people are not happy with. So there are forums, there are locations. This person didn't get any response. I have seen, we showed somebody a week or two ago that actually got a response from an Airtable employee in their thread saying that they would get a response. So we'll see if Andy here gets some help here.
Yeah, I do think Airtable employees must sometimes at least look through some of the forum threads, because they do periodically chime in here and there.
Yeah. All right, a few more. Back to, we already did that one. Okay, now we're going to X or Twitter. These are just kind of fun. Airtable should rebrand itself as, I think this says AI Airtable, to instantly get 10x its valuation in this market. I'm referring to anything with AI in it. The stock market's going crazy for right now. Although there already is, I believe there's a AI table already out in the market. I've seen an AI table product.
Oh, really? So, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What is
AI table that kind of looks like, it's kind of more of a back-end database API. It's more developer centric.
Got
it. But yeah, so that name I believe is already taken. But maybe Airtable can buy them. All right, here's an interesting one. So talking about competitors, somebody posted this on X. Atlassian basically launched an Airtable product. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Let's pull it up here. So Atlassian, if you've used any Atlassian product, very big in developer world. They have a lot of developer centric products. So if you look at it, here's kind of some screenshots. Looks very similar to a database in Airtable. It has views, layouts, filters, sort, hide fields, and then it has field types and everything. And so you can create a page or a whiteboard or a database or a blog. So they have more than just database functionality. So it's just interesting. All these products are kind of incorporating what Airtable has built into their product. You know?
Yeah. Well, and Page Piece reminds me kind of Coda Docs. It's like they're kind of trying to bring these things together. Into one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what kind of adoption this gets. I could see, for basic database, like just kind of your general list type stuff, it might make sense do it in Atlassian if you're already in that world. So it'd be interesting because I know one big integration, like they have a direct integration with Atlassian. So clearly there's a lot of customers that use both Airtable and Atlassian products. It'll be interesting if this eats into that use case.
Yeah, it might.
Yeah. So it kind of has a feel of, so you can do a slash, so kind of like a Notion where you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It feels like they pulled a lot of ideas from, what's already out there, and maybe they have an idea of what they think works best and just trying to pull it all together into one.
Yeah. So I could see the use case of like internal documentation, especially like developer docs and things like that. Most people that use Atlassian are in the developer world, although I think I've heard of marketing departments using it, product departments. So yeah, this will be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah. Feels like probably the people that already have a bent towards the developer side and are in it more would be more like that's where the adoption will come earliest.
Yep. Yeah, if you're in this world of Confluence, Atlassian, let us know if you're gonna use their new database feature instead of Airtable. All right, let's do one more. This one's from Reddit. So this is a question about replacing a dumb source of data with a sync source. So I thought this would be an interesting discussion. So this person already has sort of like, by dumb source, I think it just means like just data entry. So a normal table that they're entering, but they want to replace it with a sync source coming from an external data source. And so you can do that. So they know they can create like a new synced table that's coming from that source, but they're already using it. So they're kind of asking like best practices of how you would convert from a static source to a live sync source. And they didn't get any comments. I don't know, any thoughts? My thought would be, I mean, you really, you kind of just would, I would create both, and then you kind of would just have to update your links to point to the new one if you have any linked records.
Yeah. I think that's where you have to start. So yeah. I mean, I would still say move over, get the sync data as opposed to keeping it, dumb or static.
Yeah. But unfortunately, you can't switch an existing table to be a sync table. It has to be a new table that gets created.
Right.
So yeah, I don't think there's any way to automatically convert a table over.
But also I think sometimes that's good in terms of, I always think about like what happens if something doesn't go right. So, you can always bring in the sync data in a new table and try to make the changes if things go awry. You still have that table of all your old static data, right, from that you could move back to if you need to. So that's, it's in some ways comforting.
Right. Yeah. Even if you could, it probably wouldn't be the wise thing because it could mess up your data. Yeah, for sure. All right. That concludes what's new in Airtable and all the communities, and keep you up to date on everything. Let's jump to our sponsor, OntoAir. If you are running your business on Airtable, you definitely need to follow best practice, which is to have a secondary source of your data. Airtable OntoAir Backups is the solution for that. It gets your data into Box, Dropbox, or Google Drive so that you've got your data, your schema, and all your attachments stored outside of Airtable. So check it out at ontoair.com. All right, Leslie, get a chance to learn about you and why don't you give us your story? What's your background? How'd you come into this world?
Yeah, thanks. So I came into the Airtable world a few years ago. My professional life started in software world. So I was in a product management group of a banking software company. And then I eventually worked in sales operations for a company that was and then led into their acquisition by Salesforce. So I've worked in traditional software early in my career. When I had kids, I decided to take some years off because that those roles were really time consuming and it didn't allow me to do the parenting that I wanted to. So I did a few random things. Like I had a locally grown organic baby food company for a short time. And also I was treasurer of a preschool. And then eventually I helped my husband launch his software business. So I used some of those skills again. And so I think like a lot of the people that come on here, we have, different backgrounds. I know Camille has done, I think she's a landscape architect too. And Allie is a fine artist. So sometimes those different experiences throughout life can really enrich the work that we eventually get to do here in Airtable and working with other businesses. So that's where I started. That's my background. And then a couple years ago, a friend who I had worked with previously had connections to a dude ranch in Colorado, and they needed a new guest management and reservation system. And so we launched Lasso Book with the goal of really providing great technology for great folks and to serve a market that, because of its, pretty small size, I think there's somewhere between like 100 and 150 dude ranches in the United States and Canada. And so it's a really small size that isn't served by traditionally like venture-backed software companies because it's just a small market. So Airtable made it feasible to create an economically feasible option for them to create an app that really then meets their needs because they provide a super, super customized experience for their guests. So that's how I got into it. So we founded Lasso Book, and it really started, the first ranch started on that in early 2022. So it's just a couple years old. And then we've shared it. We go to something called the Dude Ranch Association's convention every year, and we get to share it with other ranches there. So that's a super fun client base. They're great people. But having done that, then I started doing some of my own independent consulting for Airtable. And I talked to a friend who runs several Airbnbs in the Louisville area. And so when I was talking to her, she was talking about there's a movement in the Airbnb host space away from Airbnb and maybe to direct booking. So that way you can recoup some of those fees that Airbnb is charging. And for a host that have a lot of guests, that amounts to thousands of dollars over the course of a year. And so if people are interested in putting that in their pocket, there are, ways to do that. So I thought I would look at how could I do something like that with Airbnb, with Airtable. And so the use case I'll talk about is really mostly geared towards someone who has properties who have high occupancy, but also mainly from repeat customers or repeat guests. So they don't necessarily need tons of marketing that, Airbnb, VRBO, something like that would provide them. Not that you couldn't still have your property listed on there. So that's how I got to this point today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm curious, like you came from kind of the software world, like how has Airtable like changed your perspective of like what you're capable of? And I assume you didn't have a software development background or anything. And so just talk about how it's changed your perspective of how business can be done.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting because in the Airtable consulting I work with a lot of high growth companies. And one of the really cool things is that I get to share with them how Airtable can evolve with them. So as they grow, the product can grow with them and evolve. And so when they need to make process changes, we can do that. And so that's where, traditional software, it definitely has a place. And so I'm not anti-software, anti-traditional software at all. But I think sometimes it can be a little rigid, especially for companies who experience a lot of growth and change within their organization. So that's, I think, one of the advantages of Airtable I enjoy.
Cool. Has your husband incorporated it into his business?
So actually, his business, he is launching kind of a new beta for something new. And I actually created the prototype with Airtable and, Softer, a few other integrations. And so the first beta customer is using that. And so he decided, as opposed to going ahead and, putting the capital into developing that new product right off the bat. Let's try it as a prototype this way. And then once he gains traction with a few clients, we can prove the concept before going ahead and doing that, large capital investment into the development of the new product.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great way to prototype and get it out there.
Yeah. Well, it's fast, and economically it's just so much cheaper. And it allows you to make those tweaks and refine it before that big development project gets underway.
Cool. Yeah, I'm curious on the in the Dude Ranch world, like that sounds like a fun conference to go to, the Dude Ranch conference. What's been the reaction to the software? Are you guys like the new kids on the block with like the cool fancy technology, and what's been the response there?
That's a great question. So the Dude Ranch industry, I would say, is a little bit leery of technology. There are like several ranches that still use paper and pencil to keep their calendars, which isn't a bad thing. I think they are also, and leery of anyone new. So this was just our second year at that conference. And so they want to see you there a few years before they really, really trust you. There is one other kind of player in the market, and they pulled together several kind of smaller companies that have, eventually they started, but then eventually gone out of business or haven't been maintained. And so they're really migrating everyone. And to my knowledge and what I've heard is it's not going great. So it's a perfect time for us to be here. And I think in terms of the response, people like it. I think we've also gotten into, they present us with new problems like herd management, which wasn't something I thought of. But, when you have 100 horses, you have to there's a lot to keep track of in terms of vaccination schedules, shoeing schedules, and that sort of thing. And so actually we've been able to talk with some of them and talk about adding on to GuestBook features like that, which again, the rapid development that you can add apps like that is a huge bonus.
Yeah.
Of working in Airtable.
That's cool. And I love the name Lasso Book. That's great.
Yeah. A friend of ours, both the other people I work with in Lasso Book, and we share a mutual friend who was just this marketing guru, and he was the one that named it. He named both Lasso Book and GuestBook. So
nice.
Maybe he's been reading a lot. Books are on his mind.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. Well, let's dive into what you've got, and we will see your base. And so this is the GuestBook one that's on the Airbnb side that you're going to share.
Yeah. So I'll kind of walk us through the use case. I shared this. This is just a test or pretend website that someone could put together. I use Canva to put it together. I'm a huge fan of Canva. I'm not naturally an artistic person, so Canva is a super big help with that. So when I just threw this together using Canva. This is my idea of if I was hosting Airbnb, like multiple Airbnb properties, the way I could use Airtable. So I put together a website. It's pretty easy. I show these are my hypothetical accommodations. Wish I owned something like this, but in reality, do not, right? But as I scroll down, you can see here, I've added a view of my calendar. I made a public view that only just shows the book dates. And so if I look here, I can scroll through dates where I might want to book something. And then I utilize, a request a reservation button that would allow me to request something. So we'll just kind of walk through this and pretend that we're going to do that. So this opens the Airtable form for, I'm calling my company Beach Street Cottage and Carriage House. And so, a little note. And so I'm going to just pretend to be someone named Maxine Thompson. And I have stayed with us before. I'm going to put in a phone number and then have an email address I'm going to put in there. And so I'm going to request to stay. I think I saw on that calendar that March 2nd to March 9th was open in the cottage. And we'll say that I'm going to come with 5 friends. And so I'm going to request the cottage. And I won't request anywhere else, but that's where if you wanted to request multiple properties, you could do that. And so we'll just say I'm having a girls trip. And so I would verify that I'm old enough to rent, and then I can submit. And so, just like an Airtable form, that'll go in. And so this is my dashboard. So this is where I have all my scheduling. I keep track of what's going on. And so this is the main kind of, dashboard or scheduling place I work from. So each of these represents one of the properties. And so if you have someone else working with you, sometimes this can be helpful just to help them remember if they're talking to someone or responding to an email, the details about each property. Oops. And then this is my calendar. So I can see the bookings for each property. Red shows me I have a reservation that they're within a week of their arrival, but they haven't made their final payment. And then this kind of teal color is a reservation that is 2 weeks out. And so I've sent them their email to request their final payment. And this is my new reservation. So it's yellow, and it's just alerting me that, hey, this is a new requested reservation. And if I scroll down, I have different grids here. So this is my new request that I need to review. So there's the one I just added. Then I have a list of reservations that I've offered to people. So I've accepted them and offered them, but they have not either paid their deposit and or submitted their lease agreement. And so there's also some conditional coloring that would come in if this was, a few days old. And then down here, I can see the arrivals that I have coming in the next week. And again, that one reservation is highlighted in red because she's within a week of her arrival, but has not paid her final payment. And then just a list of the departures that I have in this week. So if I open up this request, I can review, I can see that she said that she'd stayed before, but I also confirm that she's an existing customer using her email address. If I have any, notes or thoughts, I can add them here. But then I would generally, at this point, decide, do I want to approve the request or decline the request? And either way, I can include a note back to her, but this time I'll say I'll accept it, and I'll say, we're excited to have her back. And then I'll approve that. And so got a double screen there thing going, but so you can see it fell out of the new request and then came over here into my reservations offered, but not yet accepted. So when I look at this, something that you'll notice is, and I'll show you this, there is a payment record on here now. So when the system is built so that when I accept the reservation, it automatically updates this to reservation offered and then creates a payment record on here. But this is just a requested payment. It has not actually succeeded or gone through yet. And so you can see here still the total payments is $0. And so what's happening here behind the scenes is I have this automation that when the status is of the reservation, it starts as a new request, but then I accept the request. It updates the reservation to being reservation offered, notes the date, creates the booking deposit payment, and then sends the person an email with a link to pay their deposit and also a link to their lease agreement. So you can see here's my inbox. Here's the email that just came. And it says, hey, pack your bags because our rental request has been accepted. And so it gives, all the details of the reservation, but also a link to pay the deposit and to sign the rental agreement. And with both of these, I'm using Fill Out. I'm a huge Fill Out fan.
Yep.
And so this is actually a process that can replace, it's filling, there it goes. So yeah, replace the process of actually generating invoices in Stripe. So in LassoBook, the way we built it, and we worked with the fantastic Jen Red when we first built LassoBook. She was the consultant we hired. She's fabulous. But she, I think also at Airtable last year, did a session on building an integration with Stripe, doing invoicing with Stripe, that sort of thing. And so you can definitely do that. LassoBook utilizes that, and we create an invoice in Stripe and then bring that Stripe invoice URL back. And then that allows them to send that to their guests to pay make their payments. This is essentially achieving the same thing without any, scripting or Zapier or Make, and it's utilizing fill out as the tool for creating the invoice. And so the way I do this is this is my form, and so I use the update record integration here. So in my Airtable integration, this is an update record integration, which is why I create that deposit payment before actually sending this. So then in that table, in my deposits, or excuse me, in my payments table, if I go, this is like what I call under the hood. You can see my tables here. On the payment record, there's this payment link, and this is just that fill out, that link right here. So it's utilizing the record ID and updating it so it can pull all those details from the existing payment record. And so that is how that's working. And so it's a great alternative for someone who doesn't want to have to maintain scripting, doesn't want to have to use Zapier or Make, and kind of achieves the same thing. Now, what happens if I would pay this? It would actually come back and bring me back in here the Stripe payment ID. So you do have to have a Stripe account, of course, to do this. You could use, if you wanted to get more information, or go back and look at the payments that you've received, you can go into your Stripe dashboard and find the payments using the Stripe payment ID. Also brings back the name on the card, the email for the receipt, and then the status. And so that comes back as succeeded. So this, the way I do it is I have the payment amount. So the amount I've requested for the deposit, it stays as requested until the payment succeeds, and it comes back in as succeeded. At that point, the approved amount is then equal to that same, it would be $560. And then that then reduces the amount of the reservation, the amount due on the reservation. So, but that's how that works. So it's a nice little trick to be able to create invoices, and there could be so many uses for this, even in consulting, sending invoices. If I wanted to just keep most of that happening within Airtable, this would be a way to do that, utilizing fill out, and then you could actually push to QuickBooks or something like that after the fact for accounting purposes. But yeah, so that's once I would accept both so here's my payment invoice. And then you can see I also created my rental agreement here, fill out. And I think I have I did it quickly. I have a little formatting still I need to finish. But so something like this would be easy. And then they have, fill out has e-signatures available. I'm on a free plan for this test account, so I just put lines in here to make it look like that. But in real life, we would connect it using e-signatures and allow people to submit that their reservation lease agreement that way. And so then once that's done, you get something like this, that you're confirmed. So basically it would say, hey, we've received both your deposit and signed rental agreement, and you are confirmed. We can't wait to see you. Also, just if you have it set up in your Stripe dashboard to send receipts when payments are made, they would also receive a receipt from Stripe when that payment is made also. So they would, in theory, get both a Stripe receipt, and then when they've confirmed with you both the payment and rental agreement, they would get this from you, which is cool. So this is where Airtable is super handy because all of this is automated, right? Mm-hmm. So for the host, all of this happens without them touching it so once they've confirmed, we can go back to the dashboard. You can see, it would change status, and then it would change color. So that, and so you can, right now it's a little, I guess we'll call it peach. This is now my reservation offered, and then they can accept it. And so this stays hands off until either someone doesn't pay. So kind of like this person, I probably need to go hunt them down, give them a phone call, something like that, to ask where their payment is. Or, the point of arrival. And so right now, the system is set up so that 2 weeks before arrival, it'll send them an email requesting their final payment. And once they do that, then it sends them on their date of arrival an email with like their arrival instructions. That also includes their door code. And I have it set up so that their last 4 digits of their phone number will become their door code. And nice. So then, which is super handy. but then, and one of the beautiful things is there are ways to connect Airtable with even like remote key systems. So I think like Nextkey is one that I saw that has both, like it has an integration with Zapier where you could trigger that on the arrival date, you could remotely set the key to that last 4 digits of their phone number and then automatically also send them a date of arrival. So I think I have that here. Yeah. So this is what that email would look like. Is today is the day. Here's your door code. And then also I send them a little form asking, hey, would you just let me know when you're in the property and also look around and make sure it looks okay. So this is giving me a chance to actually make sure that they are in, but also that things look okay. And I think this is a proactive step that avoids the, hey, we got there and actually things didn't look the way we wanted them to, but maybe they don't communicate that with you until after the fact. This really keeps that, nips that in the bud. You're able to kind of get on top of any problems right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so then, you notice whether they're checked in or not. And then really, the process flows again, mostly hopefully, right, without any problems. You can manage it on your dashboard. You see them leave. So then really the other pieces that need to come together are just turnovers from an operational standpoint. So this is like my turnover dashboard, the number I have in the next week, the number that are unassigned. So this is where I would come in. I could choose a contractor that I want to assign it to. This would then, it moves it to assigned and sends that contact an email saying, hey, you're assigned for this cleaning. There's a lot of ways you could do this. I was thinking about this and thinking, oh, this would be a great use case too for, I think, Scott, when we shared simple texting, and that, you could connect this with that, and you could either use simple texting to send your guests text or your cleaners. I think that would be a really good use case. So a lot of different things. And then also there's this metrics dashboard that really it shows you, okay, what's my utilization? How many nights are each of my units rented in the last 30 days? What about the next 30 days? And then gives you kind of an idea of your payments collected and also turnover costs that are going to be accrued as you go. So yeah, that's GuestBook.
That's amazing. Is this pretty much people are doing this manually, all the things that you just showed here, or?
That's a really great question. I think it varies from person to person. There's a lot of different just variability because some people, they'll utilize Airbnb for their listings and for their bookings, but then all of the other backside, they'll be doing either just text, email with their cleaners, and then some of the I know Airbnb has some analytics, but they'll be doing, a lot of that just in Google spreadsheets. Mm-hmm. And so it really differs. I think for people that wanting to move to direct booking, there's a tool called like Logify. And I think you could connect to that if you wanted to. So that actually aggregates the different calendars that you have on the various channels like Airbnb, VRBO, Google Rentals, those kinds of things. It allows you to keep one calendar, but then you could actually integrate with that as well. So some people are still trying to keep those open, but then manage more on the backside. I think the use case where I see this is, again, probably more for people that have repeat guests and they want to be able to say, you know what, next time, just book directly with me instead of booking on Airbnb, and I can give you a better price and we'll both win because I won't lose all the fees.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So you are packaging this up and selling to potential other.
If someone would, yes, I would love to sell it as a template. If someone would love it, I'm mostly, still baiting it with a friend, and so really, I think one of the things again that is it's a great thing, but it's also a challenge. I find is when productizing something in Airtable, there's still so much customization that's possible. Mm-hmm. And so how do you present it as a product of sorts, but yet so much can change, and so mm-hmm. I think because even on here, I was thinking about the metrics. Well, because I had a friend who she said that they would actually also really love to think about projected expenses, because they know in all their rentals, they have to change over, get a new fridge every 7 years. And so start projecting that sort of thing, like expenses. So I think that's been a challenge, actually, is kind of what to call the product. But then also while communicating still the flexibility of what could change,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'd love to.
I agree. If Airtable, I've seen some things. I don't think it's the intended use case, but they are coming out with these like managed mini applications that might be able to help in this regard. We showed a little bit of that. It's more for like internal within a corporate, like the IT department managing, these mini applications that are inserted into multiple bases. But there may be some overlap in use case for this scenario.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges I've seen is like, there are success stories out there of people, replicating a base and having multiple locations or, multiple clients. And I think in the scenario where I've seen it work is they manage it for them, and it's kind of more of a managed solution instead of a, purchase a template and you run with it.
That's actually how we do it with LassoBook.
Okay.
We have it, we manage it for them. It stays in our workspace.
Yeah. That way you can update as needed. It's just more of a manual update across. So that's awesome. This is really cool. You can see a real world use case of the power of Airtable. Just Airtable and fill out are really the main things you're using here.
Yeah. And so many things could be tacked on to do it, other ways too, and add texting or whatever, but it gives you a solution with really just those two things.
Yep. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that, GuestBook. And if people are interested, where can they find you?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, just Leslie Burke, or you can email me. You can use leslie@lassobook.com.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. If you are not in our community, we want you to join. There's thousands of Airtable users talking about Airtable in our Slack community. Sign up for our newsletter. Join us on the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or any of our podcast audio versions. We'd love to have you be a part of the community. So join us. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the new date dependency functionality that's available. And this is a little bit of what they call like an unboxing. So I'm not an expert in this. I've actually only spent a few minutes looking at this. So we're going to kind of discover this together. So Leslie, chime in. I'm going to need your help because there's actually, there was some confusion already on how this works. So basically, this is the template they talked about. They made some new templates available. This is one of those templates, which is actually pretty nicely designed interface. And so if you look at this schedule template, you see that now they have the Gantt chart inside of interfaces. And so what we're talking about is the dependency between dates. So these dates have start and end dates, and there's some dependencies. So we're gonna look to see how this works. And so if you look on here, so this has a deadline date, and if I change the date, that didn't seem to work the way I thought it would.
So is that just changing? Is that the end date?
Yeah, it changed the end date. So maybe okay, yeah, so it doesn't have the start date on here. So we're gonna go to the data layer. We're gonna look at this at the data layer. Okay. So what's new is you'll see this new icon here. This is date dependency enabled. And so if you click on this, you'll see down here, this is new. So it says this field is used with date dependencies. So the configuration, this is the normal configuration for a date. But on here, if you click this configure, there's a new configuration. So you can turn it on or off here. And I wonder why
So you could actually make it dependent on like like a record in a different table.
Yeah, right. And so let's see. So this is, so yeah, so your dependency. So I'm guessing if I change this date, then this list here is going to show, I'm guessing, yeah, it has to be linked between the task table and the table selected here.
Mm.
And so there's nothing here. You could create a new one, or you don't need a predecessor field. But so on tasks, so there is this predecessor linked. So it's basically a link to itself. So you have parent tasks with subtasks. And so that's what we're linking to here. And so you specify the start date field here as a date. And it looks like it has to be a date field. It can't include time. So that's interesting. It only works with date fields and not date time fields.
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Yeah, I guess there's only two here. And then you also need a duration field, and it has to be set to days. So there's a lot of like specific things that you need to get this to work.
Yeah.
So this only works with dates and days as far as the duration. So, and then there is a couple advanced options. You can omit weekend and holidays, and I believe so you can actually insert days. So I believe these are days that get omitted. So these would be like special blackout days, maybe.
Oh, so you could, like, if your company had holidays, you could add those in.
Yeah, or date, like reserved days that you don't want selectable. Let's do that. And we're going to save. Okay, so now, so here's our dependency linked record. So this is linking to itself. So right here, so this iterate based links to implement a progress tracking system, which is right above it. So that means that this one is dependent on this one. And so I believe, and so we have our duration here, and this is just, so here we have the precision set to days. And so I believe how this works. So let's just play with these two that are linked. If I change the start date, and I'm going to change it. So right now, this duration is set to 5. Actually, let's start here. Let's change this to 6. And you see there, it changed this date and this date.
Yeah, and it also changed, I think, the start date for the design interactive one.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So so this is the 25th. So just by changing the duration, so now these are 6 days. It automatically changed the end date to be this duration, and then it modified this guy to be the start date. Looks like 1 day after.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I was just thinking about that. I wonder if there's a way to set it so that, if there's not now, but if there will come a point where you could set that the dependent record either starts the same day or it starts the next day, or even at some point if you could set the number of days that it would start later, if that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you could have a field that says like in between. Yeah, so it looks like it's always the next day. If we change this to 3.
Oh,
No, it didn't change. Did I get the right one? Oh, I think I got the wrong one. No. Let's see here. What are we doing wrong?
well,
Okay, so this one is dependent on this one. So it should update. Yeah, because these are now 2 days.
I wonder if there's some kind of, it only will scoot it back, but once you.
Yeah, interesting.
Mhm.
So this, if you set it greater, it'll push it back, but it doesn't bring it forward.
Yeah.
So the start date the thing is do you know the original start date that was set for this? Apparently it saves it in memory, because if I go back, it doesn't update it.
No, I think it just stays at like the last widest it's, or,
Yeah.
the farthest back it's been pushed. So I guess, but probably do you think it keeps it in the revision history? Would you be able to find it there?
Let's see.
Yeah. So you can see each of those.
Good look. Interesting. So it only pushed back, it doesn't bring it forward. So it's a dependency for extending dates, but not adjusting them forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Right. Well, that's good to know, because if you are a person that's projecting, how long a project will take, you want to always guess the lowest amount, right? And then you can always push it back, which would update your dependencies.
Yeah.
Because if you go the other way and assume, oh, it's going to take 5 days, but it just takes 3, you're going to have a big manual job of updating everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So that could be good in some scenarios, but yeah, sometimes if you're like, if one takes less time, you want everything to move up.
Yeah.
And so if I move this up, let's see if I move this to be before the end date. So if I moved this up, oh, there, it adjusted this one. So it does push back. So it does push the previous task to the day before, and everything adjusts.
Did it adjust? I didn't see it. Did it adjust the duration? Did it make it longer, or did it scoot the end date forward too? Did it keep the duration?
It did not change this end date. No.
Okay, so it increased the duration?
No, it didn't. It stayed 3. Oh, there it did change.
Forward. Okay, so instead of increasing the duration, it actually moves the whole.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What
happens if you change the end date? It doesn't change the duration. It does change the duration, right? Yeah.
The duration
if you change
changes
the start date, keeps the duration. If you change the end date, it changes the duration. That's interesting behavior.
Yeah, that is interesting. And it does not move the start date. It just changes. It just pushes out the duration. Yeah, so there's a lot of variables going on that might get confusing.
Right. There's a lot to keep straight of what, the behavior. And I think that's really important to know ahead of time when you're setting this up, because it really would play into, how long you set the standard, projects or each of these steps.
Yeah. So my thinking is if you don't specify a predecessor, so it's optional, it will still do the duration change, maybe if you're changing the dates, but not pushing the dependencies. So there's kind of 2 parts to it. So you could modify automatically the duration time and the start and end or whatever by playing with the duration or the end date.
Yeah.
But it won't push the previous dependencies. So that's interesting. I wonder what would happen, maybe for another time, is if you had dependencies, if you created a cyclical loop that you had dependencies that were like went in a circle.
Yeah.
And how the dates would work there. I don't know. We'd have to try that. Yeah, we'll save that for another segment. So
well, I wonder if there'd be or maybe they'll develop it at some point where you get a warning of, almost like Excel. Doesn't Excel give you, like, you have a circular reference?
Yeah. Yeah, and you do get that in some scenarios. I can't remember, but that does happen in Airtable. It will tell you that you have a cyclical dependency.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, so some interesting stuff there. Let us know if you're using it, how you're using it, the good, the bad, the ugly of date dependencies. I feel like there's like most features, there's some good parts and some bad parts to it.
Yeah.
Awesome. That concludes the show. Leslie, thanks for coming on. You've been my good host with me, and excited to see where things go with your products and what you've got going in the future. We'll have to have you on in the future and get an update.
I love that. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. We'll see everybody next week.
Bye.
Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, OntoAir Backups, automated backups for Airtable. We'll see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.